Welcome back, and it's the 10th of May, higher plus 5 a day. And let's just have a look at the first question. Okay, so the first question is, no, actually, let's have a look down. This is indeed an iteration question. So we haven't seen one of these in a bit, have we? So let's do this one properly. Not that we wouldn't do it properly anyway, but let's do this one. Show that x squared minus 7x can be rearranged. So often the first step of any problem. So I'm going to start with x squared minus 7x plus 1 equals 0. And I'm going to look at the thing that I've got. And you can see the thing that I've got doesn't have a square root in it, does it? So I think I'm going to move and divide by x. So let's do that. So I've got x is equal to, x squared is equal to 7x plus minus 1. In other words, take away 1 from both sides. And then I'm going to divide everything by x, which gives me 7x over x is x, minus 1 over x, which is the thing that I want. So in other words, I have shown it to be true. Then I'm going to use iteration. Now, if you haven't come across this yet, although we're getting to the middle of May, so you probably should have done this in school by now, it's a technique that you'll learn better at A-level. It's basically based on the idea of the line y equals x, and you're solving something to get closer. For the sake of GCSE, and I very rarely say this because I hate saying this, but for the sake of GCSE, just learn how to do it and just get the marks in the exam. We'll explain it better at A-level. Anyway, I'm going to put 1 in my memory, so 1 equals, and then I'm going to type 7 minus 1 over the answer, and that's going to tell me that x2 is equal to 6. Then I'm going to press it again. How many times does it want? Actually, it just says approximate solution, so I'm basically going to keep pressing it. So x2 says 41 over 6, but I'm going to say 6.83 recurring. x4 is equal to, now it's not clear what it wants here, so 6.854, and I'm just going to press it lots of times. So I'm going to say xn, where n is large. In other words, I'm just going to press equals lots and lots of times. It's going to approach a number, which is going to be close. I'm still pressing equals lots and lots of times, and I get 6.8541, which is not that far away from what I wrote above. But the point is I will merge towards a number. Strange question. Normally it will say how many times to do it, but that should be okay. Next question. Shown below is a circle centre. O is indeed a circle. A and B are points on the circle. Yes, they are. Notably, B is on the axis, isn't it? AC and BC are tangents. Great. Find the coordinates of the point B. Okay. Now, first thing I note is we know tangents meet at the same length. So in other words, I know these are the same length. I also know tangents meet at a right angle. So this is a right angle here and here. So far, not very helpful, but I've got a kite. That could be helpful. The other thing I do know is I know the point 6, 8. So therefore, I do know that the equation of my circle x squared plus y squared equals r squared satisfies 6, 8. And I also know that x squared when x is 6 is 36, and 8 squared is 64, and that equals 100, which means my radius is 10, which means I know these lengths are 10, which means therefore it must be the case at my point B. Well, the easy thing is the x value is 0, and then I'm going down 10 from the origin, so therefore my B is minus 10. Actually, I don't really like this diagram because the x and the line BC do look very similar, but the origin gives away where 0, 0 is, so that's okay. Find the coordinates of point C. Okay, so I think now we are going to talk about the thing I mentioned before, aren't we? Which is, I know, I'm going to do it in red because then you can see it slightly better. I know that this is a right angle here. I know this is 10, and I also know this length here is 10. So far, that's not helping me. Oh, I've spotted it. Sorry, it took me a second to realise what was going on there. Of course, I know it's a classic radius question, isn't it? So I know the gradient to the radius, and I'm looking here, by the way. So I know the gradient to the radius is 8 over 6, which is 4 over 3, which means I know the gradient of AB, which is a tangent to it. So why drawing the right angle is really helpful because it sort of triggered in my mind, is minus 3 over 4. Let's put that back, which is minus 3 over 4, which means I know the equation of line A to C is y is equal to minus 3 over 4x plus c. Now I'm going to use the point again. I'm going to use the point A, which is a point 6, 8, which means that 8 is equal to minus 3/4 of 6. This isn't going to be a very nice number, plus c. Let's zoom in a bit. It's slightly easier to see what I'm doing then. Which means now I've got, what have I got? So I've got 8 plus 3 times 6 is 18, so plus 18 over 4 is equal to c. So I'll basically rearrange this equation here. 18 over 4 is the same as 9 over 2. 8 plus 9 over 2, well, let's write this down. So 8 is the same as 16 over 2 plus 9 over 2 is the same as 25 over 2. Wow, got there eventually, sorry. Which means I know the line A to C is y is equal to minus 3 quarters x plus 25 over 2. Okay, now, I quite like this question, but as you can see, I sort of had to think about it as I was doing it then. I know this line here, because I worked it out in part A, is the line y equals minus 10, because I worked out the minus 10 here. So therefore, I want to know where this line here equals minus 10, because I want to find out the point C where these two lines intersect. So let's zoom in and let's do the maths here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take away 25 over 2 from both sides. That gives me minus 3 quarters x is equal to. Now this, obviously if you've got a calculator, just use a calculator. But I'm going to do this non-calculator because this could be a non-calculator question, couldn't it? It's not terrible. It's not easy, but it's definitely not terrible. So minus 10 minus 25 over 2 is 12.5. So that's going to be minus 22.5. And then I'm going to multiply that by 4 and divide by 3. With a minus as well. So the minuses cancel. Let's get rid of those because that's quite easy. So the minuses cancel to make pluses. Multiply both sides by minus 1. Then multiply by 4. So 22.5 times 4 is 90. And then I'm going to divide that by 3, and that's equal to x, which means that x is equal to 30. Now I have to say, I'm going to apologise now. I haven't, because you saw me work it out on the fly. I haven't done that in the best presentation, but all I did, I used my knowledge of radii being perpendicular to tangents to work out the equation of AC. I've just worked out the x value of where AC equals BC. I've got x equals 30, which means that y, well, we know y is minus 10. So the answer, finally, we get to the answer is 30 minus 10. Well, I got there. I definitely could have been a bit neater how I got there, but equally relatively clear layout. If that doesn't make sense, do you please let me know in the comments. I might sort of add a bit to it or add some notes, but I got there. I'm reasonably happy. Next question and final question today, hopefully a bit easier than the one we've just done. The square of w is 8. Okay, let's write this down. So the square of w is 8, which means w squared is 8. Write down the value of w cubed. Now, write down is maths code 4. You shouldn't have to do a lot of maths here. Now, I've got w squared is 8, which means w is the square root of 8. And I'm just going to write that slightly different. I'm going to write 8 to the half. And I want w cubed, so that's going to be 8 to the 3 over 2. The question is really, how accurate does it want this? All right, now let's try and make this slightly neater. So the square root of 8 is root 2 times root 2 times root 2. In other words, 2 root 2. I'm then going to cube that by multiplying that by 2 root 2. You see what I'm trying to get to in a minute. It's quite hard to explain this. In other words, that's 8, square root of 8, that's the square root of 8, and that's the square root of 8. Now, each of these pairs of 2's gives me a 2, doesn't it? So that's a 2, 2, 3, 4. So that gives me 4 2's. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 2 to the power 4, which is 16, which gives me 16 root 2. Can I have explained that slightly better? I'm not necessarily sure I could do. I think that's okay. Now, there is a little bit of a problem here, isn't it? Because back here, I said the square root of w is the square root of 8. I don't know in the question whether w is positive or negative. So actually, I think arguably this could be plus minus root 2. Now, typically, when I say square root, I take the positive, but when I don't know, I have to take the positive or the negative. So to be clear, my final answer is going to be w equals plus 16 root 2 or minus 16 root 2. And that's it. Sort of a slightly messy end to the day today, wasn't it? Started off okay with iteration. That circle question, actually, I really like that circle question. I do like circle questions generally. That one, as you can see, made me think for a second, but got there in the end. And that final question, I'm trying to think if there's an easy way of explaining that, but in a non-calculator paper, that's how I would think about it. I just think about it as combining root 2's. As ever, if you've got a better way, let me know, but let me know how it went for you. Like, subscribe. See you tomorrow.